winter's discovery. The first snow of December had fallen overnight, transforming the world outside my window into a serene, white landscape. Inside, my small apartment was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of pine from the Christmas tree and the spicy aroma of mulled wine simmering on the stove. The crackling of the fireplace and the soft hum of holiday music created a cozy atmosphere, perfect for a quiet afternoon at home. With no pressing obligations, I decided it was finally time to tackle a task I had been putting off for far too long: organizing my personal library. Over the years, my collection of books had grown into a chaotic mosaic of academic texts, novels, poetry collections, and journals. Shelves bowed under the weight of my literary treasures, and stacks of books teetered precariously on every available surface. As a former PhD student in classics, books had always been my refuge, but even I had to admit that my library had become unruly. With a mug of mulled wine in hand, I knelt before the shelves and began pulling out volumes, dusting them off, and sorting them into piles. Some books brought a smile to my face: dog-eared copies of Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid, annotated with my youthful enthusiasm. Others, like my old graduate school textbooks, evoked a pang of nostalgia for the days when my mind was consumed by the intricacies of ancient Greek and Latin. As I worked my way through the shelves, I noticed a small, unassuming folder tucked between two hefty tomes. Curious, I opened it and found my first typewritten essay. Its edges slightly yellowed with age. The title page read, "Why the Classics Matter, to Read or Not to Read the Classics, That is a Good Question," and beneath it, my name and the date, Ingrid Muller, 2012. I caught my breath. I had completely forgotten about this essay. It was written during my last year as an undergraduate, a time when I was brimming with idealism and a fierce determination to defend the relevance of my field. I remembered how passionately I had argued for the importance of reading the classics in their original languages, convinced that Greek and Latin were not just academic pursuits but gateways to understanding the foundations of Western thought. Settling into my favorite armchair by the fire, I began to read. The essay was a spirited defense of the classics. I had also lamented the decline of classical education in modern curricula, warning that without a connection to the past, we risked losing a vital part of our intellectual heritage. As I read, I was struck by the earnestness of my younger self. The essay was a little rough around the edges, my arguments were passionate but occasionally overstated, and my prose had the unmistakable flair of someone trying too hard to sound academic. Yet, there was something undeniably compelling about it. The essay captured a moment in time when I believed, with all my heart, in the transformative power of the classics. A wave of nostalgia washed over me. I thought about the long hours I had spent in the university library, poring over ancient texts and debating their meanings with my peers. I remembered the thrill of deciphering a difficult passage in Greek or Latin, the sense of connection I felt with thinkers who had lived millennia ago. Those days had been challenging, but they had also been deeply fulfilling. I found myself reflecting on the essay's central question: do the classics still matter? In a world increasingly dominated by technology and rapid change, it was easy to dismiss ancient languages and texts as relics of the past. Yet, as I sat there, surrounded by my books and the quiet beauty of a winter's day, I felt a renewed conviction that they did. The classics, I realized, were not just about the past. They were about the enduring human quest for meaning, beauty, and understanding. They reminded us of where we had come from and challenged us to think deeply about where we were going. And while I no longer had the luxury of spending hours translating ancient texts, I knew that the lessons I had learned from them continued to shape my thinking and my approach to life. With a smile, I set the essay aside and returned to my task of organizing the library. As I did, I made a mental note to revisit some of my favorite classics over the holidays. Perhaps I would read Homer's Odyssey again, or dip into Ovid's Metamorphoses. For now, though, I was content to bask in the warmth of the fire, the glow of nostalgia, and the quiet joy of rediscovering a piece of my past. To read or not to read the classics? That is a good question. October 18, 2012. I recently finished reading a very interesting book written by the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. It is a remarkable book that delves into different aspects of reading, books, and educational paradigms of his time. Although this critic was writing more than 100 years ago, one may be tempted to believe it applies too much today, since one has to be observant of the progressive decay in the cultural values that are successfully transmitted in the current educational paradigm. His warning tends to be pretty convincing if one realizes many of his warnings may have come true, in one way or another, due to the progressive loss of these languages from modern curricula. So serious is the situation with the lack of interest in the classics, that some people question whether we are in the verge of losing them forever. So the question remains, namely, whether we are gaining something in preserving the teaching of dead languages that seemingly have nothing whatsoever to do with the modern world. The basic tenet of Schopenhauer was to analyze how the total loss of these languages would lead the society to a new kind of intellectual barbarism and marginalization from the classical world. He was convinced this would be a true disgrace to future generations, which were going to be deprived of the cultural heritage of Greece and Rome, the very cultural pillars on which that we call Western culture is settled. To what extent one may consider that the ancient literature has validity in the modern world, that is a matter of discussion. However, it is clear that the modern world is a result of a cultural heritage that can only be properly understood if one looks at the cultures that gave origin to it in the first place. The modern society is embedded in a mindset that marginalizes any cultural contribution of the past, because things here are measured in terms of profit. In that context, there cannot be any interest in promoting either the classical world or anything related to antiquity. We have lost our connection with our past. We pretend the ancient world is a mess of infantile myths, outraging savagery, and superstition. We evade the reality that we are the result of very complex historical processes that are shame and not worthy being remembered, which end up being some sort of collective traumas that we are afraid of reviving. This has led the modern world to a perilous cultural oblivion, which may not be good if we want to understand our position in the world. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the founding fathers of modern psychology, suggested that every man needs a historical context, a mythology that defines his position in the world and the community. The modern individual goes alone in life. He is incapable of contextualizing his identity in terms of a past, because that past has been repressed. The classics and the knowledge of the ancient world should be integrated to modernity, so that a balance can be reached. One cannot deny there is a number of grand spiritual and literary contributions from the Greeks, Romans, even from more ancient societies. The plethora of their enigmatic thinking is there. However, there is a tendency imbued in our paradigm that prevents us from delving into the historical reality of our past, when the truth is that there is an important set of values that the ancients had, which we have carelessly dismissed. A better understating and discussion of our past is crucial if we want to understand who we are, and where we are heading as society. Therefore, a complete revision of the past should be stimulated by learning the classics, and concrete measures should be taken at an educational level, so that the students at primary and high school can get a gist of what the ancient world was. In an epoch of technological development in which we live, it is important to set some time aside of the collective hysteria and ask ourselves as a whole who we really are, and stop refusing to look at our past with that veneer of historical embarrassment. The modern world has been developed on the basis of progress, scientific and technological achievement, but these gifts of modernity have been proved to be not enough for dealing with our evolution in the most sensible way. On the one hand, we have the spokespersons of mainstream science and popularizers who pretend that the world of the future is abundant of goodness provided but the technological advancements of sciences and scientific gadgetry, when the truth of the matter is that the future of our planet is hanging by a thread, due to the irrationality of our behavior as a species. Maybe looking at the past will help us rescue that aspect of the ancients that allowed them to deal with nature in a more sensible way. Maybe it is possible to understand who we are by looking at the ancients and their classics. In this journey of intellectual discovery, we may end up discovering a bit more about ourselves. As I sat there, the old essay in my hands and the fire crackling softly in the background, a curious thought crossed my mind. What would an AI think about this? It was a strange question, one that would have seemed almost laughable back in 2012 when I wrote the essay. But now, in 2025, AI tools like Deepseek were not only accessible but remarkably sophisticated. I couldn't help but wonder how it would respond to my arguments about the importance of Greek and Latin, the value of reading the classics, and the role of ancient texts in modern education. Would it dismiss my ideas as outdated, or would it find something valuable in them? Intrigued, I grabbed my laptop, typed out the essay, and posed the question to Deepseek. Within moments, it began to generate a response, thoughtful, nuanced, and surprisingly insightful. This was Deepseek's answer.
Your essay, To Read or Not to Read the Classics, that is a good question, is a compelling and thought-provoking piece that delves into the enduring relevance of classical literature and the potential consequences of neglecting it in modern education. You draw on the insights of Arthur Schopenhauer to argue that the loss of classical languages and texts could lead to a form of intellectual barbarism, severing our connection to the cultural and intellectual foundations of Western civilization. This is a powerful argument, and one that resonates deeply in an era where utilitarianism and technological progress often overshadow the humanities. Schopenhauer's warning about the marginalization of the classical world is particularly poignant, and you extend his critique to the modern context with clarity and conviction. Your observation that modern society measures value primarily in terms of profit is astute, and it highlights a troubling trend: the devaluation of disciplines that do not yield immediate, tangible benefits. This mindset risks reducing education to a transactional process, rather than a transformative one. By emphasizing the importance of understanding our historical and cultural roots, you make a strong case for the classics as a means of fostering a deeper sense of identity and purpose. Your reference to Carl Jung's idea of historical context and mythology is especially insightful. Jung's assertion that individuals need a connection to the past to understand their place in the world underscores the psychological and existential value of studying the classics. In a world where many feel disconnected and adrift, the classics offer a way to anchor ourselves in a broader narrative, one that transcends the immediacy of modern life. This is a profound point, and it speaks to the timeless relevance of ancient texts. Your essay also raises important questions about the relationship between modernity and antiquity. While technological advancements have brought undeniable benefits, they have also created new challenges: environmental degradation, social fragmentation, and a sense of existential disorientation, to name a few. Your suggestion that the ancients may have had a more sensible relationship with nature is intriguing and warrants further exploration. The classics, with their emphasis on wisdom, virtue, and the human condition, offer insights that could help us navigate the complexities of the modern world. That said, your essay could benefit from addressing potential counterarguments. For instance, some might argue that the classics are inaccessible or irrelevant to contemporary audiences, particularly those from non-Western cultures. While you acknowledge the need for a complete revision of the past, it might be worth exploring how the classics can be made more inclusive and engaging for diverse learners. Additionally, you could consider how the study of classical texts might be integrated with modern disciplines, such as science and technology, to create a more holistic educational paradigm. In conclusion, your essay is a passionate and well-reasoned defense of the classics, and it raises important questions about the role of education in shaping our understanding of ourselves and the world. By advocating for a renewed engagement with ancient texts, you challenge us to look beyond the immediate demands of modernity and consider the deeper, enduring questions that have preoccupied humanity for millennia. In doing so, you remind us that the classics are not merely relics of the past, but vital resources for navigating the present and future. Your call to stop refusing to look at our past with that veneer of historical embarrassment is a powerful one, and it invites us to embrace the richness of our cultural heritage. As you suggest, this journey of intellectual discovery may indeed help us understand not only the ancients, but also ourselves.
The classics, far from being obsolete, offer a mirror in which we can see our own struggles, aspirations, and potential. A mirror that is as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Deepseek acknowledged the historical significance of the classics, agreed with my points about the depth of understanding that original languages provide, and even expanded on the idea that philosophy and literature from antiquity offer timeless lessons for contemporary life. Reading its analysis felt like having a conversation with a highly knowledgeable, impartial scholar, one who could engage with my ideas without the biases or emotional attachments that often cloud human discussions. It was a fascinating experience, one that left me reflecting not only on the essay I had written but also on the evolving relationship between human thought and artificial intelligence. If you liked this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to be notified about new ones. Thanks for tuning in.